oh my god, Vitality are like one of the best teams we have. Asterix, Hilly, what the hell are you doing?
And we can go for another rate it or hate it. Ignar on Yuumi. Hate it, absolutely hate it. Dagda doesn't need to respond first.
When you look at like Uzi being voted the number one person, imagine Caps beating Taylor Swift.
Yeah, that's right.
Basically what happened.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Euphoria for 2024, episode number 4. I am not DD, also known as Daniel Dracos, also known as Sifa back in the day. That's right, I remembered. Yeah, I remembered. I'm here to fill in the man who's feeling a little bit down in the blues. He's obviously sick. That's why I'm here. I'm the replacement for today, and Dagda has to deal with me, hey?
Yeah, well, it's been a pleasure. I mean, we had a great conversation.
Oh.
It's been absolutely fantastic. We got to talk about like a bunch of the teams going into playoffs.
Sure.
We got to talk about some of the picks that we really liked in the meta and what we're kind of like, do we rate them? Do we hate them?
New segment.
We'll get to find out. But yeah, it was a really, really good chat. We got a little bit overtime, so I hope you enjoyed the slightly longer episode today. But yeah, make sure you can watch us on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and SoundCloud. So make sure you're checking in and hope you enjoyed the episode.
Let's get to it. Now, since we are talking about replacements, maybe it's a good time to talk about other people who've been replaced.
Oh.
Maybe not for the, I was going to say for the better, but I'm not sure. I love Dracos. He's great. He's better than me. Big news came out. You saw it on Twitter, right? You know, we're talking about Yamato, KC. Dude, this was rough. Like,
yeah, honestly, I'm kind of shocked. It feels a bit unfair to Yamato.
Yeah.
Like the guys only just got there, and obviously there's very clear issues within Karmine Corp, but it's like these aren't really things that I feel like should be put onto the coach. Like, Bo running in ahead of the other 4 players and his team is upset, is like resetting the base, is like, yes, these are things that you need to fix, but it's not like getting 5 people onto the screen is the coach's fault. That is clearly a fault of communication within the players and nobody actually talking to each other on this team. So, and the fact that they've played 3 weeks of games. They had like a handful of scrims before the split started. Like, how can you actually judge Yamato off?
Played 9 individual games, BO1s against 9 different opponents.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I think the thing that rubs me wrong about this and the thing that bothers me the most is the fact that like Yamato's been very vocal in the past. You know, he's a very nice guy, we know. They've been outward facing. He's been working on himself so much, as well as the team in the process. And there's just no time to develop here. It's only a winter season. It's so short. You'd think this would be like a year-long thing of getting them to be the best roster because on paper, the names are really good. Like the individual names are really good on this roster. So that's what I think. It just rubs me wrong because, you know, I've watched this guy for the longest time and we know from co-streaming, from him being on broadcast that he is a really hard worker. Mm-hmm. And it just feels like a shot in the gut, you know? Yeah,
big time. And especially when he like, I don't know. I know some people on like Twitter are saying, "Oh, well, before you talk about this, like make sure you look at like, oh, it's like Reha who's been with the team is going to replace him, and he's been here for the longest time, and he understands them, yada yada yada." It's like, then why bring in Yamato to begin with? Like, if this was ever the game plan, it's like just put Reha into that position from the get go. Don't say you're going to stick with Yamato for like a while. I don't know what the contract was, but like, don't say you're going to go with Yamato if that was never the game plan. So it feels like basically Yamato's the scapegoat here for all the issues that exist. And I think it should be a player replacement thing. I don't think it should fall back on Yamato's head.
I'm just going to say it. I mean, Targa's had a lot of criticism. Mm-hmm. I'd start there. You know, I don't care if they come and get me back. Like I'm just saying, you're right. He's a scapegoat. And I will add as well, like, by removing coaching staff this early in the year as well, when you're a developing roster, first time putting these pieces together where, you know, the most vocal member comes from LPL originally, has an assistant coach built around him who worked with him on FPX. And then you have these other pieces coming in, like Upset, who's been a legend in the league. You know, you've got Saken and Cabo coming in from secondary. Cabo's been here before. Saken.
Yeah, is also, he was on Vitality a while ago.
That's right. Yeah. But it's like there's so many moving parts. That's why it feels like it's way too early again.
Yeah, and I think that's the biggest problem. It just feels like they haven't really given any of this a shot. Now, I do say, like, there are very clear issues with, like, I think Bo at this stage has kind of shown that he's, I don't know if it's an unwillingness or what the story is, because, like we will both be heavily Bo biased from FPX days back in LPL. But I think he's very much shown that, look, there is an issue here, that he's not working with the teams that he's on. We saw it in Vitality, never seen it again in the Karmine Corp. So I definitely think there seems to be issues with, hey, people just need to talk to each other about what they're doing, and you can't just decide I'm going to go ahead and do this thing. Because there's too many times where I see Bo like running ahead of people and just getting caught out or making sure the fight's in a 4v5 because his health bar is gone. So I don't know. It feels like there are plenty of issues on Karmine Corp. And to just go like axe Yamato feels very weird to me when you're like, hey, look, clearly this is a problem with getting these players all on the same page. Yeah. And yes, technically you'd be like, hey, isn't the coach supposed to help with that? He's like, yeah, but when they're in different books, it's going to take them a while to go and find everyone to get them onto the same page.
I know. And so you kind of left with this like, I don't know. I don't know how it's going to look for spring. I don't know how with the coaching change and everything it's going to, KC going to turn it around. But I think overall, I think the sentiment for this team is going to be a little bit more negative than before as well. Because even the KC fans are coming out and being like, hey, like it's only been a split. Even the fans have been so vocal and been so, like punchy for KC's success, aren't really happy with this. I don't know if you've looked over the Twitter sentiment, especially from that post, looking at the comments, like it's a bit of doom and gloom. It's a bit of sadness even from, the local fans.
Yeah, I do appreciate there was a lot of like nice sentiment towards Yamato in the send-off, being like, hey, look, like, thank you for supporting us. Because as you said, like last year, he was like co-streaming all their stuff. He was very much on their side. So I think it's nice to see that the fans at least haven't turned on him in this. Because it just doesn't feel fair at all to kind of put him in this position where, I think there's way more issues. And I don't think this is going to be something that solves Karmine Corp's issues.
No, not at all. And I hope that he's got some involvement in the future, whatever that is. Maybe he gets rotated back around. I don't know how it's going to work, but
I would be very surprised if he did. I think at this stage, you're just like hands off,
disassociate. Yeah. Well, he deserves something. Shout out to Yamato, deserves a lot of love. But we can get into something a little bit more positive if you like. We'll put that to the side. Great way for me to start, isn't it? Come in as a fill-in and just go straight to the negatives. But to be fair, I cause drama. We know that. I cause a lot of drama. It's a great...
You're so lovable, though.
How could you? I don't think so. I think you're the lovable one. Dude, for me, I'm like the person that causes drama, has like really outbound opinions. Don't get me started on commenting on semifinals of Worlds. Man, too hard on. Now, Dracos set something up, and it's a shame that he can't be here to start this off. But he wants to bring in something called Rate It or Hate It.
Yeah.
That's exciting. You want to explain it, Dagda? Because you're...
So basically myself and Didi were chatting yesterday and we're like, look, there's a bunch of new picks that we're seeing in the meta at the moment. Mm-hmm. Let's try and have a look and basically go through what are some of the standout picks that we've seen from a couple of the teams over the course of this playoffs, and then talk about whether the team, have they been cooking some good stuff? Has they had that little bit of spice, or have they completely burnt the kitchen down? So we're going to go through it. We'll rate them. We'll hate them. We'll figure out exactly where we are. But the first team to start with, I think, is going to be G2, because my word, the Zach pick was...
How good is it?
Incredible.
Okay, sorry. How much do we rate it? You're going to get on the branding.
This is so sick. I rate it. I think it's so, so cool. The fact that he's got... It's always kind of been a pick that's like a cheese pick, I suppose, in top lane for a while. It can do very well. It's always been a lane bully.
Yeah.
But I think when you've got so many immobile AD carries that are in the meta, or so many backline threats that are quite immobile, having something that can just immediately gain access to them is so incredibly strong.
True.
And I really loved the combo that we saw with BB specifically, which was take the Zac and take away. So you've got that QW combo to just slam him down.
Take away what?
Take away the health bars of everyone.
Yeah, that's what it did.
Because they were like, how the hell do you play it? Because you've got this Varus, right? The poke Varus, which is by far the top AD carry pick at the moment. True. That we just see all the time because of its flexibility, because of the amount of damage it can turn out. But now you just have this pick that just sends itself in there. And it's like, cool. What are you going to do? You try to... I think it was it yourself or maybe Dracos that said it during the cast? I can't remember. I cast that game and it's gone now. But in the middle of the cast, it was Dracos. Yeah, it was like, you try to send out this Q. You line it up, you rev it, you're good to go. And it's like, you just slow yourself. You just make it easier for him to launch yourself. In, right? Yeah, you have a terrible time with it. So, yeah, I really do rate this pick. I don't know about you.
And I mean, 100%. We knew coming in. This is one of my favorite picks of playoffs so far, just for context. One of my favorite champions. I think of the whole split. It's been nice seeing Hwei, but seeing Zac is good because not only do you skirmish early, not only do you always want to fight, the fact that this champion is just, as you said, such a nuisance for the current meta we have is hilarious. Watching him getting into the backline and cause mayhem. And he's just unkillable.
Yeah.
I don't know if people at home know this, but the passive is pretty much like double what the ability cost is. So Slingshot, let's say, takes 30 health. Yeah. The passive, the bloblet it drops, gives you like 60.
Yeah, it's insane.
So you don't ever end up dying. You can be such a nuisance, as I said, and it's actually not that bad of a laning phase. Like you suffer through the early levels, but once you get the all in,
suffer. He killed Oscarinin on Karma.
He solo killed.
He solo killed. It's like what? Like it's so dumb because all you do is like, cool. I take like all this damage, I trade it, and then I just wander into the minion line, happy out, press W a couple of times, and then I get all my health back. It's insane.
I think it was Jhin. I think it was in game 2 when he picked it up, or one of the games against Fnatic.
Yeah.
And on the Zac, it was early. They did like a lane swap at like 14 minutes. Yeah. And he just solo killed Jhin as well on the Nautilus support. He literally just under turret.
I will say that was a little bit in from Jhin because he was like level 8 to level 11. And I was like, what did you expect to happen here, mate?
That's also true. But the fact that like the damage you do because of the max health damage of W, which is such a big trading tool, is insane.
Yeah.
And like, man, no wonder we rate it. Like this pick is insane because I think, as you said, it's been sleeper for a while, but like Broken Blade is great on things that can pull the trigger in teamfight, like Yone we saw in the last game of the season as well. Like Broken Blade, when he has things that pull the trigger in teamfights, man, this dude's good. And that kind of leads us into the little, the little segue from great Zac to like now great team, question mark.
Well, I think that's the thing is like, for me, I think it feeds into why G2 are so strong is being able to bring out all these picks, right? Like Caps, you get BB obviously bringing out the Yones and the Zacs and this kind of stuff. Caps looks absolutely insane on the way. Like you've got Yike who's willing to bring out things like the Bel'Veth, which is his little pocket picks. Even like he was Kazakh's one, I don't want to say one trick, but like Kazakh's main essentially coming up through the LFL. So like you have these guys that they have all these off-meta picks that they're willing to bring out. And it makes it so difficult to try and draft against them. And I think it is causing issues for teams when you go up against them. Because even I was looking at their their solo queue match history. And every single one of them, apart from I think Yike, is playing Karma.
Oh, really?
So it's like you see a Karma locked in. It's like Mickey's playing it. They're playing it in the AD carry role. They're playing in the mid lane role, and BB plays it top.
Flex?
Yeah, it's like it's like the old Pyke back in the day for 2019 G2. It's like how the hell do you try and draft against a team like that? So it becomes very, very difficult. And even you got things like Hansama's Draven is high priority bans. So it just feels like when you play against the squad, it's so difficult to go up against them. And then it leads into, well, look, are they the best team in the league? Personally, I'd say yes. But I also think it's like kind of tough because at the same time, they are so inconsistent. Like it's even like they smacked Giant X in their series, right? But then you actually kind of forget that, oh wait, if you look at the first few minutes of game 1, Yike had a terrible opening to that game. He was like 0-3 or something in the opening few minutes.
True. You
couldn't find that consistency. At the start of the split, you could see they were struggling to find out like how to value Void Grubs versus like playing around bot side, and Hansam and Mickey would play aggressive on waves where Yike's playing on towards Void Grubs and they die on bot lane. Like it feels like there's a huge amount of issues that were there for them where it's just like, what the hell are we supposed, like how do we rate a team where, because if you, let's be real, we don't look at G2 for how well are they going to do in the LEC. It's kind of taken for granted that G2 are going to do well in the LEC.
They can muck around where it doesn't make a difference. Yeah.
But it's like, it's how well are they going to do at an international level? And it just feels like the performances that they've had in the early game shows that, for me, I don't think they're going to be able to perform at the international. Now, you can always go like, oh, well, at least they're getting practice playing from behind, you know? But it's like, realistically,
that's what they're doing.
Yeah, but realistically, it's like, I do think their mid games are good, but their early game tomfoolery is just an absolute mess. They need to figure it out.
It can be really rough. And I will say as well, like, I think a lot of teams have struggled in early game because, as you said, figuring out grubs is one thing, but also figuring out the meta, at least in 14-1, was a big thing. But also, there were teams like BDS who could play the early game, at least, more consistently than G2 in the regular season of Winter. On that point, I think you're right. I think G2 are still the best team because we just know the ceiling's so damn high. That's the hardest thing, isn't it? And it's like last winter. I think last winter they finished 4th as well. Then they get into playoffs and it's like, oh, you start getting into BO3s and BO5s. And then GO2 with the draft gap, with the fact that they have so much diversity and can pull out things like the Zac top, like Broken Blade's Vladimir. I think he played at the end of the regular season as well. Like you're like, what's Yike going to play in jungle? He could just return to something like a Graves, probably play a Kindred. Like I think that's what's crazy about this team is just so unexpected. You don't know who you're walking into. Even a team like Fnatic, you can get caught off guard.
And I think it's incredible, but also frustrating. Like, you look at that game 1 versus Fnatic where they played the Lucian Nami. Like, that was hype. That was like, okay, this team clearly understands the wing con that is playing around Lucian, how to get him ahead, how to like play for mid lane, like Yike flashing in and using ultimate to set up for the Lucian in the mid lane. Like, it looked like a team that had practiced a lot. Like, it was basically a very similar combo to what we saw a lot of last year from the LPL and LCK teams, like a Maokai, a Vi, or a Sejuani that would ult on mid lane with a Lucian and then allow him to play aggressive on the mid wave to like set up for a bunch of plays. And they clearly understood how to play with the pick. And they have a stellar early game. And then you look at the next couple of games, or even like, as we said, the early game versus Giant X, you're like, I don't know why we can't have this consistency.
Where is it? Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of, I do think you're always looking at if we get the good coin flip with G2, they can be absolutely incredible. But I really wish they had a bit more consistency to them this split.
Agreed.
But it does feel like almost like inevitability that they're just going to be able to find it. Now, I think the really interesting one is going to be how they end up faring up against BDS in a little while. But yeah, I think that's where we're going to see how they do over the course of the weekend, because BDS have been a team that look very, very good.
Well, you can move to them if you want, because I feel like every time a G2 discussion comes up, it's always just like, yeah, they're annoying, but they're still great. BDS, I think, in a different bag, like, have kind of restored a lot of faith. You know, I put them really high in but I'm just going to say this. I put them top 4. A lot of people didn't. I'm very proud that I did, because it was coming off the back of Worlds that I was like, dude, Labrov is my favorite support now from the West.
Yeah, you were hyped on him going into this place.
And he deserves it. And he still is massive. Like, you know, it might just be on Blitzcrank at the moment that people are really highlighting, but still, like, I think Labrov is one of the best supports in the league. We are also playing Rated or Hated. I've got to stick to the theme right now. Let's start in a more negative light for Dagda, right? This segment obviously tailored towards you. Dracos is like, I'm going to throw this in. Ice's Jhin. Rated or hated? Dagda, open us up.
Yeah, I hate Jhin. I hate this champion so much. Okay. I understand that, like, he has his merits he can provide utility with the Deadly Flourish. He's got the Curtain Call, and like, you play this long range poke utility style AD carry.
Yep.
I understand. Why not play Varus or Ashe? Like, these picks do so much more. And oftentimes, even if you look at like over the course of this split as well, this pick has been taken too many times into like something like a K'Sante in the top lane.
True.
And you just look at the K'Sante, you're like,
it does nothing.
Nobody kills him ever.
You don't do anything. You auto K'Sante a couple of times and you're like, gotta reload, guys. It gets just laughing.
I cannot remember what game I was watching, but it's like you see the Jhin unload like 8 bullets into the K'Sante, and I think he lost like 200 HP.
Under turret as well. It was like under turret. K'Sante taking up turret, diving. I don't know if it was Ice, but it was one of the recent matchups. Yeah. K'Sante's just tanking it. Solo kills, walks out with his ulti up, so he's got less resistance. Yeah. And he's at half health. Like,
yeah, it makes no sense to me. And it's like when you see it picked up, oftentimes it is against something like a Varus, because you're like, oh, we want to play it like long range and make sure we're able to deal with it. But it's like, it just doesn't provide in a lot of situations what you need. I don't know. I don't hate on Ice specifically. Jhin, it's just I hate Jhin.
You hate Jhin.
It's just I feel like it does nothing.
Jhin is like the Lucian for Dracos. Dracos does not like Lucian, right? At least Western Lucians.
Yeah.
You don't like Jhin's. And I was saying on broadcast, because I kept referencing you, I'm like, oh, Dagda wouldn't be happy with this. Dagda wouldn't like this. You were like my inspiration. Venice is like, I have the feeling that Dagda really doesn't like Jhin.
It just, it does not. And then especially when you're getting more tanks in the jungle as well, it's just like, dude, how do you kill them?
Like I was going to say, last great Jhin I remember seeing, and quote me if I'm wrong, anyone at home, but I remember Huanfeng 2020 Suning. Yeah. I don't know if that was the last great one. There's probably a Korean one at Worlds or something. But
and even he had to go into the enemy base to make sure he wasn't shooting the front line.
That's right. That's right. So, okay, definitely hate it. I will say, I don't always have to stand with you, but I stand with you on this because I agree. In the current meta, like, how do you kill it? And if we're seeing things like Zac as well, Jhin versus Zac, it ain't good. Yeah. But on a positive note, how happy are you with BDS? Like, how good do you actually think this team is? Because they've impressed. Like, they've gone up against, some of the top teams in the league and done really well.
Yeah, I actually think BDS as a whole have got significantly better. I think Nuke has had a pop-off performance. Adam was actually coming into the split. I was expecting Adam to have a good split because, one, I think Adam is very, very strong. But two, because top lane ends up more isolated with the changes to the map, a lot of the champions and the style that he has is playing hyper aggressive in that lane. And it's like, yeah. So I was like, this is just a straight up Adam buff. This is going to be really, really good. So I think it's going to work for him having now the opportunity, and even like Darius getting buffed on recent patches and stuff. He's just going to be happy. He's going to be happy out.
He's already strong.
Yeah, and I think their team fighting is one of the best in the league. Yep. And I think it's very clear to see, like, at times you can see Ice is trying to catch up to team fights and maybe they're a little bit too quick at the start of the split. But a lot of that's been fixed. And I think when you come down to it, like, Nuke is performing incredibly well. Sheo is on form as well, where if you look at summer last year, I was a little bit uncertain where to put Sheo because he looked really good at the start of the year.
Yeah.
But as it went on, he got to a point where he just wasn't sure what he was supposed to be doing, didn't feel like he could track people as well as he did at the start of the year. But this time around, like, he looks significantly more comfortable. And yeah, I think it's just across the board, BDS have had a massive step up. The only downside is I still think they have the same flaws as last year, which is they don't really, because Adam ends up running a lot of like Flash Ghost or something along these lines at the top lane, their ability to play side lanes is kind of hindered. And they don't set up waves particularly well. And I think a huge amount of it more so is because you play with this style of top laner, you're not as focused on how do we prepare the map and set up things correctly.
True.
So I think and this is why, like, coming up against a team like G2, I think they will struggle a little bit, because I think if teams are able and willing to play outside lanes and set up the map better, I think that's when BDS are going to struggle. But I don't think teams in the LEC do that particularly well.
Dude, Vitality just walked into them. I think it was like my frustration in the game. Vetheo and I casting Vitality BDS, and we're like, okay, Vitality won that early. Game 2 was egregious. Like they won early game so hard through bot, through the invade. It's like, it's over.
Yeah.
I can't remember who just got so fed, but like still, Vitality, that was winnable. And then BDS just win one team fight. As you said, like, if we had to define what BDS did well to, everyone at home, we'd probably say they're a great team fighting team. They're really good at capitalizing on the mistakes. But as you said, if a team can run the map and not walk into a very bad position, to keep it very simple, I think BDS, will struggle as well. So what are you concerned about then for the lane matchups? Like, if we look outside of that and we go, hey, what's the lane matchup? Like, if G2 are playing good early game and, BDS are continuing to play some really good lanes themselves, like, what's the lane that you think maybe BDS will struggle with? Or
I wouldn't say struggle with. I think
interesting.
The interesting one for me is top lane. Because what the hell gets played, right? BB is showing a whole heap of different things.
True.
You have no idea what Adam's going to bring
Zach
out as
versus Darius. Like, that's possible.
Well, honestly, yeah. And I think it's the fact that you've got Darius in the back pocket of Adam is actually a good answer into it. Because we saw Oscarinin had a great performance in Demir win on it. I'm pretty sure we've seen it over in the LPL as well. Well, maybe we haven't seen it, but I have a feeling we've seen at least Zach or Darius into Zach somewhere else. I can't remember off the top of my head where we've seen it.
Probably LPL.
But yeah, I think there's like good answers into. Adam has good answers into this kind of stuff, so I think that's a very interesting matchup. Also, just like to come back to Nuke, I think Nuke has had a fantastic year. I think there was a lot of criticism leveraged at him when we looked at BDS last year for his champion pool, where it kind of felt like he had 2 or 3 champions that he was very, very comfortable on and couldn't really roam outside that.
Yep.
At least this year, I don't know how many more he's added to his pool or how much more comfortable he feels, but certainly the meta suits him down to the ground, right? I think his Azir has looked fantastic. His Nico performance has been absolutely spectacular. And even the fact that he's brought out like, he's kind of just stuck to the Nier and the Azir and the Nico.
But you raise an important question, is like, how far will that champion pool go? I mean, at the moment in mid, it doesn't really have to go that far, because I think the level of those champions itself, from what I saw last year as a spectator, has definitely gone above and beyond. Like, Nuke's Azir is insane. I think the best Azir in the league right now. And, you and I were discussing off the table, that this guy might be the best mid lane. I mean, if he's not top 2, I think personally, I think he's the best mid lane. Like, Caps was great at farming in the split. Like, he was consistent edge when G2 were kind of falling over. But, like, Nuke is a playmaker.
Yeah.
And that's what's huge. It's, not just on things like the Nico, like, it's on the Azir, it's on the Orianna, 31.5% of his team's damage in regular season as well, for a good reason. Great team fighter, big element to how BDS play the game as well. Like, and it's crazy with all the mids that we have in the league, like Humanoid, like Caps, I'm obviously missing people.
I mean, like Caps, Humanoid, Niski, Vetheo has had some good ones. Like it does feel
Nuke's being the most consistent. I feel, and I don't know how anyone can prove that wrong. Like he's been really, really consistent, and in playoffs so far as well, he's continued that on, and that's what's scary for G2, I guess, as well, is that like Caps can't just roll over this mid.
Yeah, and I think there's definitely been times where Caps has had inconsistent games. I think he's been better this split than we saw a little bit last year.
I think he's been the best consistent G2 member for me. Yeah, at least regular season.
Yeah, and I think it's always unfair when I talk about Caps because like I don't compare Caps to, when I think of Caps in my head, I don't compare him to LEC. I compare him to the best of the best. I compare him to the Knights, the rookies, the fakers.
You're like the father. You're like the father that's like, the son comes home, Dad, I got S in math, science, everything. Yeah. And then, they're like, okay, that's fine. That doesn't matter.
Yeah.
But you got S- in this. And this is what really matters. You're like the rude parent that just wants him to be 100%
but
all the time.
It is that. It is 100% that. Where it's like, I don't want him to be like, state champion. I want him to be national champion. Right? It's actually make it to that top stage. And I mean, when you look at him back in 2019 with Fnatic, when 2020 with G2, like that's the level that he's playing at, right? 2018, Fnatic, 2019 G2 was like that was the level he's playing at. Like, I think there is a lot the fact he's an MSI champion, right? Like there's a lot there where you're like, this guy is at a world-class caliber, and that's, I feel like, where you should hold them. And that's why I talk about G2 as well, is where I should hold G2 is to a higher standard because they've proven that they can get to that point.
You kind of have to at this point. I mean, I feel like Fnatic are held to a similar standard, maybe not the same because of the consistency of G2 and the fact that they've also held their roster as well, right?
But that's I'm sorry, Fnatic fans, but when was the last time Fnatic won anything, right? Like it's been a long old time, right? Yeah, so true. I think that's why it's like you look at G2 as kind of like the guys.
They maintain it.
I think it is incredibly cool to see that BDS are now in that conversation of, you can contest G2. It's not like can you? It's you contest G2. And it's like, this is actually now a discussion of, can you beat them? And I'm like, that's a really, really cool place to be. Because when you look at the consistency that BDS are bringing to the table, it's, hey, as long as you guys can perform like that, and G2, like we've seen they've shoddy early games, you can play with Sheo, you can find these early leads, like have some kind of pushing lane for Ice, maybe Labrov gets hands on his Blitzcrank, like this is very much a team that can beat G2. Yeah. And I think that's a very, very cool point to be at. And it's like something that we felt last year in was it spring or winter? My brain is collapsing. But basically last year for BDS, spring, was like, this is a team that can go the distance. This is a team that feels like they should be able to compete. And it's really cool to see them match that. But I feel like there's less doubts around it because it's like you can see the really cool level that they're playing at here.
It's crazy because you lost Crownie. I mean, you lost the main voice from everyone. Everyone told me like this is the voice of BDS. And Ice came in, and at first, like I think we were doubtful in the first week. Against G2, we're like, Ice got caught out a couple of times. But through the split, this guy's also developed. And I know, we've got many more teams to talk about, but I just leave it on the fact that like Ice has now assimilated into the roster. He looks like a carry, like he looks really good, which is going to be exciting, when they go up against Hans Summer, or when he goes up against Hans Summer, I should say. So,
yeah, I think a last moment on this.
Go for it.
I think the spicy matchup is Labrov versus Mickey X.
Yeah.
I actually think that's the spicy matchup.
They're both crazy.
That's going to get overlooked.
Yeah.
And they're going to want to fight. You're going to want to see like Nautiluses and Blitzcranks and all these engaged champions that are going to go toe to toe. It's going to be so sick.
We're going to get Pike versus Blitz or something. I don't know. We're going to get Hook City down there.
But I think that is actually like, don't get me wrong, Nuke's Cap sick, BB Adam sick. But I think the support matchup also deserves to be like, hang on a second, this got a little bit of spice.
I agree. You can make an argument for anything on this Rift. I'll listen. Dude, this it's such a fun matchup, and I'm glad we get it again. BDS could be first or a second team. Like that's a very big reality. A team that could also be first or second. No, we're completely opposite. Time to talk about vitality. This team is frustrating. Yeah. Before we talk about the Dracos TM segment, this team is so frustrating, dude. Like, what is happening? They look so good. Pad looks cool, and shout out to Pad. And, like their game, what was their first game, Dagda? It was versus SK.
Yeah.
You're like, dude, this vitality in the regular season, you and I cast
what
that.
the hell is happening? Yeah.
And then against BDS, you're like, okay, vitality again. Like, what are we doing? How do we lose that game too?
I do. So, so hang on. I'm going to start out. There's a couple of different thoughts in my head here, right? I'm going to hit with the hated or rated is Lee Sin, right?
You we will
get to the hated or rated on the Lee Sin first. But that draft epitomizes to me everything that vitality is. Because the entire time I'm like, what am I looking at?
Oh, true.
What is happening? I don't understand. I don't know what it is. And when you look back at like the SK versus vitality one, it was like this, oh my God, Vitality are like one of the best teams we have. Asterix, Hilly, what the hell are you doing?
True.
And then it got into, okay, Vitality, let's see what you can do. Then we get to the next thing and we get this Lee Sin draft, which is, look, I think it is sick that they were willing to bring out the Lee Sin. I thought it was cool as an answer into the Akali. And then like you get that, oh God, they've swapped the Akali to top lane to play into Cassante and you're like, crap, what the hell? And then Vetheo just kind of gets destroyed.
You got bodied in lane.
Yeah. There was very little that he could do. Now, they did end up winning that game, but I don't know.
They did. Oh, hell yeah, they did. Because later on, the Lee Sin had a lot of relevancy, I will say. He played like a bit of a jungler to the top side, consistently roaming. And, I know we'll start with the hated or rated, right? And you are where on this? Because you didn't give me what you like hated or rated. And then you're like, I'm not sure about this draft. Lee Sin.
Yeah, I don't know. I like the thought process. I think it would be cool into the Akali because your I'm pretty sure it lets you see Akali in the Shroud. So it means that then or at least you're able to hit her anyway in the Shroud. So it's really, really nice.
Q does.
But it would have been a sick matchup. It would have been really cool to see. I think it looked worse because of the fact that they moved things around. But honestly, I think Vetheo did play relatively well on it. We didn't see like the insane mechanics and the outplays, but like he kind of just went, screw mid lane, I'm going bot, which was definitely the right call. And that kind of worked out. But yeah, I'm not going to be like, oh my God, this is something we should see consistently. I think it's like maybe we'll get it in the future if the Akali is definitely going mid lane. Outside of that, I don't hate it, but I don't particularly rate
That's
it either.
not the segment. Dracos died for this. Like, he let me in charge for today. He put his faith in me to hate it or rate it. And Dagda, it's the second time we're doing this, and you can't give me one. Which is it? You can't be on the fence.
All right, I'll hate it. I don't.
Okay.
Yeah. Look, it just the draft did weird things.
It did, but you know what? Like, Niski, they R5'd into this from memory, like with Lucian, right? They picked the Lucian into it. The lane sucked because if Lee Sin can't, even if he ward hops forward, Lucian just ease away. And what can you do if you don't land Q? It's rough. I think Vetheo moving across the map, that's why I love it. Sorry, rate it. Damn it. Sorry, Dracos. The Lee Sin, I think it was a nice flare. And I agree, like obviously it would have been nicer into the Kali, but the way the comp pieced together and the fact that Hilly was actually on Leona as well, I think was also an important factor of that draft.
I do think as well the fact that they had so much chase down potential, because you can see an awful lot of the times it's like they're chasing down in like bot lane. It's like Lee Sin ward hops over a wall or like Sonic Waves over a wall. Kalista then sends Hilly in with the Leona over the wall, and Hilly actually had a good performance on the Leona. I think he like predicted a lot of like flashes or movements.
One of his better games for sure. Yeah.
So I definitely think there are like merits to the pick. I think they got caught. I think we would be having a very different discussion, I feel, if it actually ended up in the Akali matchup and I could get a proper feel for what it was supposed to do.
Yeah, I think, and look, I'll be honest, like it was a spur of the moment thing, I think, as just Vitality giving us flair. And then as we said, it was the next series versus BDS, and we kind of lost that flair again. And I guess BDS are obviously a much better team than SK. Yeah. Like, there's no doubt about that, right? Like, BDS are a top 2 team at the moment as they stand, or top 3 at the very least. And then Vitality kind of ran out of options. Game 2, if people didn't see, a bit of a spoiler alert, the early game was really good for Vitality. BDS, roughed it up a bit. And then it was one team fight, and then Vitality lost it all.
Yeah, and I think that's where it gets difficult to rate Vitality because it's like
so difficult.
I think Karzi is a very strong AD carry, but it's like he has highest, at least coming into the week. I haven't looked at the stats for this week, but coming into the last week 4 for playoffs, he was highest damage per minute, highest damage percentage of any AD carry in the league, but then was also highest deaths of any AD carry. So it's like,
yeah.
So it's like when you come into team fights, I think even when you have these leads, the way that team fights are playing out, there isn't a cohesive understanding of how to play them, I feel like, on Vitality, where it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna have like Douglas isn't on a tank, so he's not really covering sides. Photon to me is more of like a Jax kind of player. Now he is playing a lot of tanks this split, don't get me wrong, but it's like I don't think he has a great understanding of like how to buy space for his backline and that kind of stuff. Or, you know, like when I look at someone like 369 who's incredibly strong in tanks, you can see the difference between the two players.
Yeah.
And then you've got Hilly who's just kind of doing his own thing. So it's like
he is like I know Hilly is this fun dichotomy of good and evil, of like, you know, this guy can have pop-off plays and sometimes he can run it. I think this split, there's a lot more running. From what I'm seeing externally, I don't know if you agree
I think
with
that's
this.
fair. I think that's fair.
He's struggling. Like, he's struggling. Like, there's some moments, like, walking up to the Ashen Lane, you see Jungle on a ward coming down. Again, someone find the game. And he's walking forward. And you're like, Hilly, like, you need to run out.
I think it is SK Vitality game 1.
I think it was. Like, they still won that game.
Yeah.
But it was like, you're like, Hilly, what are you doing? I remember casting it and just asking, like, what did that achieve?
Yeah.
What was happening?
Yeah, and I think that problem is exacerbated with this team where they don't set up for objectives well. They don't set themselves up to team fights particularly well. And then when you get into the actual scrap, then they don't know that someone's coming in on the flank. They don't know where people are coming through from. And it means you just end up in this weird position where the team fight goes completely south, like we saw against BDS, because they don't actually have the vision they need to understand how to approach a fight.
Yeah.
I think, honestly, for me, this team is like, does Douglas perform well? And we get this early lead, fantastic.
True.
And I think Douglas has had great performance. This isn't like a bash at Douglas. I think, but it does kind of feel to me a little bit like they're starting to become too reliant on Douglas having the brand. Where it's like, okay, cool, I can clear fast and get a ton of damage and we can go for dives. Because even when it was it was the second game against SK where the first game, where they had that Ashe, which is where they went for like, okay, we get the lead for Vetheo. And I think Douglas had some really cool pathing for that.
Mm-hmm.
But then it's like, okay, well, I get the kill mid, I then get to work with Vetheo, and now we're just playing for bot lane over and over, and that works well. But if you don't get that, I don't feel like Vitality have like plays to get back into the game.
And then, you know, like it comes to BDS, and then BDS ban it straight off the bat, and you're like, cool, game 1, we've lost the brand. Game 2, BDS red side, they ban the brand again. And like Douglas goes on the Viego, and, you know, like it wasn't the same thing. So right now, like, he has impressed in some of his games. I think one of his rel games during the regular season was good, but it's like the brand is obviously his best champion. And any team going up against them, you know, in the lower bracket, like, we got to look for the winner of GX versus Mad. And, you know, like, if I'm doing my homework versus Vitality, I'm like, well, first things first, we ban brand. Like, and then we get a hell of a lot more options.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to see, like, yes, you've got we got the brand, but I also feel for like Photon, it's like he's had 7 games for Cassante over this split, and I'm like, why are we not playing to Photon's strengths? Like,
he's the best. He's literally like, Photon despair is real.
Yeah, I mean, look, he's lost 2 games that they played the Jax, and maybe they feel more comfortable having him on a team fight carry where they can try and play for around bot lane and stuff like that, which I think is definitely where the meta's kind of at. But it's, I don't know. I feel like having things like an Aatrox come out more often for him, or like give him the opportunity to be a bit more of a lane bully, because that's kind of where Photon's strengths did lie, and he was very, very good in a 1v1 scenario.
Yep.
And if you can then lend that over into, hey, because they like to play for Void Grubs a good bit, like, let's try and lend that into, hey, get early skirmishes on the top side where we can include Photon. Like, I think you've got another option to play for there. But
agreed.
Yeah, I think the biggest problem for me, honestly, with Vitality is that this team kind of lacks an identity. They have several good players, that are just individually good enough and understand the game enough that they can pick up wins.
Yeah.
But it doesn't feel like they have a cohesive, this is our game plan and how we want to operate it in the game.
Yeah, they're still working on that. I mean, that's the beauty of winter though, right? Like, I guess, like you get the short start of the year and then you can work on it in spring. The fact that Vitality made it here and like, again, won their first round, I think was big. I know we have to push on, but I was just going to ask you quickly between, GX and Mad, like going up against Vitality, let's assume either one. Do you know what's going to happen with Vitality? You just put your hands up and be like, they could win it, they could
Just
lose
don't.
it.
Yeah, I really don't. And it's like, if they want to try and play more heavily around bot side, like we'll get into MDK and Giant X later on, but like, if you're going up against Mad Lions Koi, that's a difficult matchup for you.
Oh yeah.
I think Mad Lions Koi's bot lane is absolutely spectacular. And having Elyoya who's consistently down there just makes it very, very difficult to look. They did lose to Fnatic, but you could kind of see Fnatic were very much aware of how play around bot side. So I think that'll just be a big test, in particular for Douglas.
Yeah.
To be like, how can you match Elyoya when it comes to controlling that bottom side of the map?
God, what are Vitality going to be? So many questions and more that lead us into a team that I have less questions about because they just faced off against G2. That's why they're in the lower side of the bracket. It's Fnatic with our brand new game show, Hate It or Rate It. But except it's rated or hate it. I think, Dracos, I'm sorry, hate it or rate it. Does it sound better? No, I'm not going to come in and just start dissing him. He's not even here to defend himself, and I've attacked him like four times already.
Yeah, just kick the sick man when he's down, Jake. Go for it.
I'm sorry. I hope you're feeling better. By the time he's listening to this, though, maybe he'll be better.
He'll be up and ready to go, yeah.
Bro, over the period of being a year, I've been sick like 4 or 5 times. It's rough. I don't know if my body's trying to adjust, but like I've had food poisoning. I've been sick. Man, I've developed a gluten intolerance. Like, what has Europe done to me? I didn't have gluten intolerance before I left Australia. Where are we?
You just didn't have real food. Yeah. You've come to Europe, you get access to proper food. To be fair, though, in Berlin, like there is food of every type, but yeah,
it's I thought Sydney had the most kebab shops in the world. Like, no joke. Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought, man, Australia it's everywhere, right?
Yeah.
I come here, there's one next to another one, and then 2 doors down, there's another one. I thought, man, the competition here must be fierce.
Yeah.
And the prices are all the same. Which one do I go into? And there's one across the road. In a block, in a street, there's like 7 kebab shops. I'm like, dude, we like it. So Karma top, hate it or rate it.
Rate the kebabs, and I rate the Karma top. That's where I'm at.
You do?
Yeah, I actually...
But Oscarinins specifically, you rate it or hate it?
I think Oscarinin definitely didn't have a good time into the matchup, right? But I'm not going to... I don't want to take a one sample size game to be like, this is the worst pick ever.
That's
like
fair.
we did with Video's Lee Sin, I hate it. I definitely think I think Karma is incredibly strong at the moment. Flex picks are very, very good. The opportunity to like move them about, the fact that she can be played in 4 different roles is absolutely insane.
That is nuts.
And for people who don't know, a lot of the reason is she got buffs coming in onto 14.2, but also the fact that you get with Malignance now, you lower your ult cooldown, but your passive on Karma is that every time you hit people with a spell,
you get an ult cooldown.
Lower the ult cooldown by 5 seconds.
Yeah.
So basically what ends up happening is that when you hit level like 16, if you have Malignance, Horizon Focus, and say like Ability Haste as you're working towards Crypt Bloom, or you have Crypt Bloom, you then hit if you hit 3 people with your Empowered Q, you just have your ultimate again.
Yeah.
It's absolutely insane. So it's just a case of, okay, cool. So I can get my Empowered Q, so I get a ton of damage off of that. Then I get my Empowered E to shield everyone, and make things very, very difficult to try and like break through. Or if I'm in danger, I can get my ult W off, which then also gives me the 5-second cooldown again.
Yep.
So I get because I'm damaging one person, and then I just get a ton of healing back as well. So it makes her very, very frustrating to deal with.
Unkillable. You do a lot of damage.
Yeah.
You're great in a team fight because RE is still like, it's not as great as it was back in 2018 in the Ardent meta, but it's still a great ability. It's like a 5-man shield. It's great in team fighting comps. Like, and also the lane Karma, anyone knows, any top laner knows, any solo laner knows, anyone knows in bot, that Karma is just like one of the most oppressive lanes because you have range, you sustain, you have shielding, and that gives mobility as well. So it's like you kind of have a bit of everything except for a gap close.
Yeah, I mean, but you just move quick with your shield, right? So it's like
that's the gap close. That's it.
And I think that's it. I think that's why I do rate Karma in general. Oscarinin definitely had a rough time against us. Now, I think there was realistically in that lane matchup, the way I look at it is you just push the wave, you make sure you're fine, and like you just empower Q it, maybe hit Zac a couple of times. You're not going to be able to poke Zac out of the lane realistically.
Yeah.
It's way too difficult with like second win, Doran shield, and then he's just going to be like picking up all of his blobs. He just heals so incredibly much. That being said, I don't think there's a world where you should consistently be getting hit by Zac Qs and getting like the knock together off of them where he's just consistently able to get a ton of damage off you. And that seemed to be the downside for Oscarinin. Like, was the level 3, level 4, he got a solo kill or something like that? I was just like, how?
Yeah.
So I don't know what happened in that lane phase. It looked like Oscarinin just wasn't ready for the Zac matchup, which is fair. Karma top is new. Well, not new, but newer into the meta.
Yeah.
And Zac top has always kind of been a cheese pick, so I'm not too sure how often he's actually played a Zac Karma matchup.
Yep.
But it felt like BB just had a significantly better understanding of how that matchup played.
And it's a hard question because like Karma top for Oscarinin, do I rate it? Probably not in that game. I probably hate it, but Karma top, I rate it because it's so strong.
Yeah.
Again, as Dagda said, small sample size I think is completely fair for context.
I do think as well though, like it looked worse in that matchup. Sorry, I should close the mic. It looks worse in that matchup because
it's okay, it's your first time.
Yeah, true. Because of the Zac Vi. Like Zac Vi Hui combo was disgusting to play against. The fact that you're like, okay, is here, you can try an ult if you want to, but it's like Zac's coming in, who you could ult him, then Vi's coming in after and she's unstoppable. And then like Caps is just like, hey, over here, I'm going to hit you. Yeah, it's like right the way back here. He's like, oh yeah, cool. I'm going to be able to get, it's insane. Like it was such a cool comp. And I wouldn't be surprised to see more of this, to be perfectly honest. But I think it made things very, very difficult for the Varus, who we already kind of alluded to. Like you slow yourself when you try to Q. You want to be able to poke from afar and they're immediately able to cover massive distances and hit you from just as far away, if not further away. Actually, it is further away because Hui can hit from Fog of War. So it's just insane. Like this was such a cool composition from G2. And I think that's why we kind of got to see Fnatic fall apart a little bit.
Yeah.
But I think in future operations that the Karma will still have a place. Especially when you look at like the ability to in this. So the composition was Karma, Poppy, Azir, Varus, Blitzcrank. I think you have an opportunity as like the Karma to speed up by Blitzcrank to look for a hook, or even if you want that chase down potential, Karma gets that big mantra shield and you can chase everyone down. So I think there are definitely like opportunities for Karma to slot in. It's just that this was not it. This just wasn't the time for it against what G2 would come to the table.
Also say, Brom in that comp as well is a pain to deal with. So I feel like overall, like, we always get excited for G2 Fnatic. I know Dracos wanted to ask, like, are Fnatic still the favorites to take down G2? Should it be BDS? I think we've already decided, it is BDS. Yes, Dracos, it's BDS. But I mean, it's an interesting split because I think just for Fnatic, before we start talking about some of the other champion pools, I think Fnatic holistically for me has been about, moving Jhin obviously into bot, like you've changed out Trimby and Jhin coming in with Noah as well. People are like, oh, it's an all Korean bottom lane. From the in-houses I heard before split, they're all speaking English.
Yeah.
Like they're all speaking English. So that's, not something to really, I guess, worry about or think about isolating in the bottom side. But I think for Fnatic, like we saw it in the Yone game from Oscarinin that wasn't very impactful, even though I think he ended up winning. Like I think that was versus Mad. Someone's gonna have to quote me on that. But like this team has kind of been piecing things together where there's been some games where it's like, like Razork hasn't had the same control. Oscarinin like has been a little bit low for me. I think that's been a big change. And like some games like Jhin as well is like in no man's land, or like Noah's not having the same impact. And as well, I know it's very generic, but like I think with Fnatic, there's been some games where it just hasn't been as flary.
Yeah, I think so. My impression of this squad is just like this is kind of a mid-jungle team.
Yeah,
and
as it was last year, right? Like,
but I think Humanoid has definitely had a better regular season than we traditionally see from, right? Like that's kind of the age-old joke is like Humanoid will come alive in playoffs, but I actually think Humanoid has had a great split.
First 2 weeks especially, I think, and
he looked absolutely fantastic. And even I think looking at game 2, Fnatic versus G2, you got to see how threatening that mid jungle could be. It was like playing off of the Jax and the Orianna to make sure they get that control and like play that into the rest of the map. They picked up like a bunch of kills over the mid lane. And I think you could kind of see like that is when Fnatic are at their strongest is when they have a better mid jungle 2v2.
Yeah.
And I don't even mean like player wise, I just mean matchup like champion wise. So I think that's where they can try and play through. But the problem is it's like, if that doesn't come to the table, it feels very, very difficult for them to try and find those moments to like outplay the map. Or when I get to team fights, like they're still very, very strong team fighters, but I don't feel that threat that I feel when I look at like a team like BDS, where it's like it's almost like they are so on the same page as BDS that it feels like they can outplay you from a 2-3k goal deficit. Whereas I don't get that feeling with Fnatic, where I'm like, if they are 2 to 3k goal down, chances are they're going to still lose the team fight. And I think that's where if this team can get a lead, yes, they can snowball, but it's trying to get that lead. And I think against a team like G2, definitely as we said, they can get those leads. We saw them get those leads. But I'm not convinced for them to like problem solve how to beat G2 in a matchup like say that game 3 where it's how do we play against the Zac and Bai and stuff like that.
We can't. I mean, and also I should clarify as well, like for me, like trying to diagnose this team, I don't think I have as good of an idea. The only thing I've absorbed is that Oscarin's not having a great split.
He did a rough series against G2.
And he did too, right? And it's like for Razork and Humanoid, as you said, that's how this team holds control. You know, on my statement on Razork, I'm not 100% sure. But I do know that there is an important topic that should be brought up within the bottom side, because the bottom side can sometimes be a little bit iffy and, you know, like where are they? Noah is something that wanted to be brought up because, you know, this has been, I think, brought up in the past. And Phil, show me potato salad. There's something brought up. And, you know, like Noah's champion pool, Dagda, how real is this for you? Because... You know, again, what was it? Was it the Ezreal game we're questioning?
No, he brought out the... he's basically stuck to Varus and Kalista for this split.
He has to.
And I can get where Noah's coming from. Like, he has obviously played different stuff. Like, it was the Xayah, the Zeri, when that was meta, and now he has obviously moved over to other picks. And it may not necessarily be a case of this is only champions that he can play, but it's certainly champions that when I look at Fnatic, they feel more comfortable playing with him on. And whatever that identity might be, or whatever that communication might be, it definitely feels like, look, if you get rid of the Varus, and we're not the only ones to have spotted this, right? Like, you see teams banning the Varus away from him, trying to make him uncomfortable. So I feel like, and look, Varus is a very strong pick, so you could be like, oh, that's just a meta or whatever, but I definitely do think there is some merit to it. And I don't think it's necessarily the case of, like, these are the only champions that Noah can't play. It's more of a case of these are the champions that Fnatic have kind of pigeonholed him into. We want him to play for these moments. And it's like, whether that is when it was like Zeri or the Aphelios, right? It was like, we pigeonhole Noah into hypercarry. We want him on hypercarry and we will play for him on hypercarry, right? And now it feels like on this split, it's more so a case of, hey, like even moving in towards the, like with the Varus, we want to try and play more for bot side, see if we can get him onto the poke style where he can try and take a few pop shots and make sure that he's okay. But or in the Kalista where we can try and play for a bit of early skirmishing down bot side. It feels like it's kind of he gets pigeonholed. Now, shout out to Odea, our stats person. She was saying in their most recent vlog or video that Fnatic put out, can't remember the name of this off the top of my head, I'm very sorry, but they were saying that they wanted Noah to kind of step up and be more of a shot caller. So they were trying to limit him to a smaller champion pool so that then he could have more of an opportunity to shot call and had to think less on the mechanics or different matchups and all that kind of stuff. So there is definitely a reason from the sounds of it why they have him kind of like on these handful of champions. But yeah, I think it is, whether it's Noah's choice or Fnatic's choice, there definitely is a bit of merit to Fnatic have decided these are your champions and they feel comfortable playing with these champions and you're on them.
And for people at home, you need a bit of context. I can read the tweet out to you because Noah said, and this was on February 6, 2024 at 1:02 a.m., the perfect time to put out a tweet like this. People said about me, 2 years ago, I could play only Zeri and Ezreal, 2 champions. Last year, I could play only Aphelios and Xayah, 2 champions. And this year, I can play only Kalista Varus, 2 champions. That criticizing when you know nothing about me, I will prove.
Yeah.
Well, and also I'll apologize. There was no Ezreal game. I'm getting confused because I think I was criticizing a similar AD carry.
I mean, it's in the tweet, right? So,
but it's also, yeah. But I think ultimately as well, like, Dagda made a really good point where it's like, you know, when you get put on these champions so that you can have more of a voice and you can be more vocal, it makes sense that you're playing a champion or you're playing a set of champions that you do really well. It doesn't mean you can only play those 2 champions, but you play those 2 champions damn well. And then, you know, the rest, maybe they're not on the same caliber, but it doesn't mean you can't play only those champions. To give him some credit, right? Like, because I think he deserves that with, you know, being in such a high quality team that he is. And like, you know, his Kallista's still good. His Varus is still, you know, great as well. We've seen Aphelios, we've seen Lucian in the regular season. We've seen a Senna game since as well. So I guess we do leave it up to Noah to kind of prove what else he can play, because I know there will be other things.
Yeah, and I also, to be fair, if you're just getting Varus every game, you just take Varus every game, right? He's the strongest.
It's so damn strong.
So
that's right.
Why wouldn't you? So obviously there is a little bit of like pinch of salt that you have to take this with, because it's like, I'm just getting Varus. Why wouldn't I play Varus? But yeah, I feel like there is, and I don't want to be like bashing Noah specifically, because I feel like it's more of a like, hey, this is the way the team has decided to play around Noah in a certain extent. And that's why we have seen, like, literally from the tweet, right? You can see he's got several champions that he has been comfortable playing on and looks good on. But yeah, I think it's it definitely feels like there is a deliberate style Fnatic have decided on their bot lane, and that's what's working.
There's a split where Jackie Love played only Aphelios because it was so strong and because it's how it worked for top esports. Like, even the best, you know, sometimes limit their champion pool. Doesn't mean they're 2 tricks. It's when you see it over like, you know, 20 different seasons or something. Oh, that's excessive, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We got to move on, because if I make this show go longer than I should on my first day, well,
mate, that's what I did.
Day.
I had like a 2-hour show on my first day this year, so don't worry, you're good.
Maybe Drake did it on purpose. Let's talk about the matchups that feed into these 2 teams, right? Feed into the Fnatic, feed into Vitality. They're waiting for both of these guys, or all 4 of these guys, I should say, to sort it out. Mad versus Ginex is where we can start, and we can go for another rate it or hate it. Ignar on Yuumi. Hate it, absolutely hate it. Dagda doesn't need to respond first. Ignar has been one of our best supports, even on things like the Senna, but when he's on Engage, he's legendary. At Worlds on NRG, like, that was the fear for the West. That was the fear for G2. He was the best Alistar from the West at Worlds, and I think Ignar and Lebrov, for me, like, my 2 cherry pick of supports. Ignar on Yuumi was just in no man's land. He's like, I'm roaming as a cat. And he's got no movement speed. He's walking at 200 MS, right? And he gets caught out of river twice. It's like, dude. And then they pick it again in game 2.
Yeah.
Why?
It was not pretty. I'm not going to lie. It was very funny to me, though, because it was that, like, the record scratch moment where, what was it? It was against G2. It was like, he's walking down river as like a little cat where he's taking the wrong way.
Yeah.
And then like Yike jumps over Dragon Pit. You get like another member of G2, maybe Mickey comes this way. And then Caps walks out from mid lane. And he's just sandwiched between them. It's like record scratch, like, oh, you might want to know how I got here. It's or the to be continued.
Yeah.
You know?
The JoJo's outro, yeah. Oh,
but
man.
it was not pretty. And I look, I think this is something to do with Ezreal's as well, is that like, yes, we used to see Ez Yuumis. I much prefer to see Ezreal's as something that like can actually go and like roam and have an impact on the map.
Yeah.
But yeah, the Yuumi was just not it. I think she has deliberately been hard hit to like try and push her out of the pro meta.
Thankfully.
Like, she's got slows. She doesn't have the CC on her ultimate anymore. Yes, she's got some heal and shields, but I just don't think she fits into what you need. And yeah, I mean, with something like this, it's like, I would have much preferred to see something like a Bard in this scenario, especially when you're looking at like a Hui Senna. Like if you stick a Bard into that bot lane, you're able to ult Tempered Fate, Hui, Senna, the Azir in the next game. Like, I think you have a significantly nicer time. But yeah, it did not work at all. And then Ignar, as you say, he was basically playing it like he was a tanky member, where he's able to like walk around river and have these roam opportunities. Like,
you're
not doing anything, mate. And even if you wanted to be like, oh, well, you know, Yuumi Xin Zhao is a sick combo. Because when you think back to when Yuumi was meta, we'd see a lot of like Yuumi Olaf jungle, because Yuumi would attach to Olaf, leave the Ezreal bot lane, and then they'd start roaming around together.
True.
But when you've got the no push in mid essentially because you got Silas into his ear. When you got a Senna bot lane that you're not really going to be able to play heavily around either. When you're got the Ezreal bot lane, you're not going to be able to play heavily around, and you're like, our top matchup is not winning realistically either. It's like, what are we playing for in this scenario to actually have Zinzao work with Yuumi on? You can't go for raids and 1v1 the enemy jungler. So yeah, I think it was a bit of a weird one. I can kind of see the angle that they were going for, but I just don't think, I don't rate Yuumi. I hate it. I hate it.
I think their priority was just like, they're like, okay, Ignar, we want you on Yuumi because we've first picked the Ezreal on red side, and we're like, oh, Ezreal's so strong. But the problem that you have is like Ezreal Karma's really strong. Yeah. Ezreal as an 80 carry right now is like, probably like S to A tier pick. But like, as we've seen in pro play, Varus, even Aphelios with certain combos with like the Milio combos being, say Lucian Nami's a higher pro, but that's a can of worms they're not opening. but yeah, it's like the Yuumi was to facilitate the Ezreal, which in the end, like for Patrick, wasn't able to do much anyway. Yeah. So that was kind of frustrating. And I feel like, we can kind of talk about the matchup here because Mad and Giant X is an interesting one where, like, coming into the start of the season, you'd be like, oh yeah, Giant X would be favored over these guys. After what we've seen, I'm tending to say, like, I think Mad overall is a stronger roster.
Yeah.
And I think they've got more, they've got some similar draft diversity, except it's in the top side. And their 2v2 bot, as long as it doesn't get pushed out early, is, I think, one of the stronger 2v2 bots in the league. Stronger, not strongest.
Yeah, I definitely think they are. They've been the focus, though, which I think is the big problem.
That is the issue, isn't it?
Where I think Alvaro definitely had a bit of a rough series against Fnatic, but I still rate this bot lane incredibly highly.
Yeah.
But I do think that when the bot lane fell apart, you kind of got to see the cracks.
Yeah.
Frescowi didn't have the best of times against Humanoid, got solo killed in that Akali versus Tristana matchup.
Sure.
Then when you moved on to game 2 as well, that was where you end up with a ton of pressure from Razork down towards Noah and Jhin to get control there. Also, shout out to Noah and Jhin. I think they've had a fantastic series against these guys with that help from Razork, because when you look back at their regular season game, they kind of got shown up a little bit in the 2v3 outplay, but they completely decimated them. Ton of pressure on that bottom side, making sure they get them ahead. And then you kind of end up in this position where there was moments that Supa kind of knew where he needed to be to defend points on the map, but the rest of the team wasn't really there. So there's like one moment that I remember, I can't remember if it's game 1, game 2. It must be it was game 2, where Alvaro on the Rakan and Elyoya on the Brand are like clearing a ward in Tribrush bot lane on their side of the map. And I'm looking at Supa and he's like trying to look at mid lane turret. And clearly he's like, guys are about to take mid lane turret. There's 3 people here. Why are there 2 people clearing a single ward on bot side? Now he doesn't respect the dive. He ends up getting dove. He dies and then they get more and more control. And I felt like this kind of snowball effect of, I don't know if it was frustration, where Supa was like, I'm behind. I need to try and step up and be a carry. Maybe I can play a little bit greedy on this wave or whatever it was. But I think there are issues.
Also, I mean, it's also inexperience in like the things you can get away with in Superliga or like, secondary league. You come to LEC and it's a completely different ballgame. I think it's something that was discussed over the season where it was stuff from, KC that was a topic, from Mad and some of their early season games as well. It was the same thing where like that same greed that won't be punished in secondary league, just as a theory here, guys, is definitely going to be punished by a team like Fnatic.
Yeah. I mean, even Supa talked about it on the podcast last week as well, where he's like, oh yeah, I want to push the limits and learn from where I can place my limits, right? I think that is a healthy mindset to have. But I think in this game, it was kind of got to see, look, if bot lane falls apart, what is the fallback plan?
Yep.
And I think Mirren on the Jace has looked pretty decent, but there just wasn't enough there. Frescowi, like 4-1-5 in the Ezreal, wasn't able to like step up and take that carry mantle in the manner that I think they kind of needed him to. Same in game 1, he was 0-5 on the Akali. Like it felt like they just didn't have the fallback plan after bot lane fell apart. I think this is now going to be a consistent trend that we see against Mad Lions Koi, where it's like we are going to hard camp the bot lane.
Yeah.
And just be like, what is the rest of your map going to do?
Well, then, I mean, with Patrick and Ignar, they'll be cheering because that's a reliable bottom lane. I think one of the most reliable elements. Jackie's still moving into the groove for Giant X. We know Peach can be hyper aggressive again towards that bot side, like most junglers in the league and most junglers in any meta anywhere. So you kind of sound like you're just setting up to say that Giant have an edge here, that Giant can know when to punish.
I think I still give the favor to Mad Lions Koi. I think they have been more consistent in this matchup specifically. And it's hard, like Giant just didn't show enough over the course of the split for me to be like, oh yeah, they're going to sweep this. I still give the edge to Mad Lions Koi. I think it's just something that needs to be discussed as we look towards like what would be their future games of like, I think, what is it? They get the rematch against Fnatic? Or no,
I don't think so, no.
They go
Vitality.
Vitality, sorry, my bad. Yeah. So they'll go up against Vitality. That could also be one where they do end up getting control, though. We've seen Douglas has on the brand been playing very heavily for bot lane, so maybe they struggle again. But I think that's where we are going to start to see teams hyper-focusing Super and Alvaro and just going, what have you got, lads? And the question is, can they respond well? But for Giant I don't feel like they can respond well enough. And I don't think this is a team that has been able to push advantages well enough.
Okay.
And they're still doing this like 14 to 20 minutes, all hands on deck, we're going mid lane play, which has worked sometimes for them. But I think it's a bit too telegraphed at this stage where they will just like double TP into mid lane, see if they can catch someone, see if they can break mid lane tower off it and try and crack up the game that way. It's a very weird one, but it has caught some teams out. But I think if you're prepared for it, and especially in like a best of series, you should be. I just don't think it's going to work out.
Yeah, you got time. Like you got time to prep for this. And yeah, when you have BO3, you have more information too. So that's interesting. So you kind of picking mad for this one. And obviously the focus lane has to be bot with everything you said. Like bot makes or breaks. Because if it's Patrick Ignar going well against Super and Alvaro, that's Mad Lions feels like a big part of their play is down. For Giant X, like Patrick and Ignar have some volatile lanes and like they can take over games as well. That's the weird thing about Giant X, I will just add. This team has had like many different games where it's like, man, Odo just steps up out of nowhere. Oh, Jackie's debut, like first 2 weeks is huge. Patrick Ignar, like, oh, you gave him Draven. That was a mistake.
Yeah.
Anyone can kind of carry this team.
Yeah, but that's what I want to see from
Weirdly.
Giant X is like create volatility bot lane. I want a Draven Nautilus. I want Zyra. I want something that's aggressive in the bot lane so you can play for. Like bring out a Blitzcrank for Ignar. Like try and get control of this bot lane and have Peach on something like a Zinzao or a Vi or something that is easy to, I am going
Simple
to play
engage.
bot.
Boom.
Yeah, and follow up well.
Yeah.
And I think that's how you try and disrupt what Mad Lions kind of want to do. But yeah, I think Giant X just haven't been consistent enough for me to be like, I give them the edge. Whereas Mad Lions Koi, like we've seen what they can do. Yeah. They've had great games. So I give Mad Lions Koi the edge in the series, but I do think there are ways for Giant X to try and disrupt them. It's just like, I'd say it's like a 70-30 for me in favor of Mad Lions Koi.
I could come to the table on that. I'm also, to add in a tidbit before we move on to SK Team Heretics, the top lane champion pool, I hope it cooks. Odo, Odo like Asante, like his was great. But Meowin, just whatever's on the table, man. Literally, you go to the restaurant, you look at the back of the menu, you're like, dude, all this stuff here in the mains, they're like, chef's recommendation.
Yeah, Meowin walks in and goes, I know there's a secret menu. Give me the secret menu.
Oh, yeah. Better analogy. Much better analogy.
He's like, he knows that there's like whatever the hell is in the In-N-Out Burger secret menu. He knows about the dirty stuff. He knows that there's like all this entire backlog of stuff that no one's really realized is an option in the top lane, and he's willing to bring it.
You have to say a secret code word to get the menu, like sugar plums. Oh, sorry. Yes, sir. Give me the menu. That's weird. He's crazy. Let's move on because I'm going to be in trouble at this rate. SK Team Heretics is the other matchup. Remember, losers bracket for both these guys means that the loser is out. They're out for winter until spring. So they have to wait for a brand new season when there's leaves on the tree. Wait, spring? Leaves on the tree? Yes. Yes? No. Yes. Yes, there is.
That's
Spring's coming up next. Usually I'm used to autumn coming up next. It's crazy.
Oh, yeah, because you're flipped.
Because I'm in summer. I'm in a summer mode. Then I get to autumn. Then I get to winter, spring. Anyway.
Yeah, it still breaks my brain that your Christmas is in your summer.
I know. We spend it in a swimming pool.
It's so weird.
Banger. Absolute banger. So Team Heretics and SK. This one will also be interesting because I feel like Team Heretics, I was sold on this team being a top 3 team. And it really, really bothers me. And I will say a great place to start is talking about Ezreal mid. Rate it or hate it, Dagda. Where are we at?
I hate it.
It didn't do it. It didn't do much.
I mean, look, we've seen it a couple of times from different teams, but I'm just not on board with it.
But was it a Perkz factor or was it a Ezreal mid factor?
No, I dislike the pick in general.
Okay.
It's like, so the reason behind taking an AD mid is, like we see with Lucian, we see with Jace, is you don't have to spend as much mana to try and push the wave because you have AD. So like your auto attacks deal more damage. And oftentimes it means that then, like, say you're playing against a Syndra as a Jace. Syndra has to burn her Q on the wave to push the wave as effectively as you do.
True.
She then burns through her mana, or you can like find those windows to trade because she's used spells on the wave. With Ezreal, you can still get some of that push and it can still work out. And that's where, okay, cool, like, let's try and lean him into skirmishes in the early stages. Like, well, Ezra just doesn't really do a huge amount with the push. Like, when I look at an early skirmish, I don't think I want an Ezreal. I'm like, I'll take a Jace 9 times out of 10 in that.
Well, Ezreal's roaming.
Yeah, it's like, oh, he has a tier. Oh, scary. But it's like, and like, you can argue, yes, Jace will oftentimes go for a tier in the early stages, and like, it does delay his like spike or whatever, but it's like, he still has access to a massive rotation of spells where he can get a lot of damage off, and he has like CC he can provide with his E and that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay, I actually prefer it in that regards. So it's like, I think there are better options mid if you want a pushing AD mid laner into sideline. Even like Lucian, like we've seen, I think works incredibly well in the same vein. When I look towards things like, okay, well, if I want to provide poke, and that's what I'm picking the Ezreal for, I'm like, well, why not go towards, well, Jace that we've already highlighted, I think provides a lot more and then has more upfront burst when it comes to his poke in the later stages of the game. But also, like, I think you can lean in towards a Corki. Like, Corki was open in a lot of these matchups. Like, why not just take Corki?
True.
Like, if you really want to play for poke.
Similar, better scaling.
Yep. Yeah,
better
exactly.
team fighting capabilities.
Yeah.
Like,
I mean, he's disgusting. Corki's damage, that like Malignance Eclipse combo is
dirty
so
build.
nasty.
Yeah.
So I don't understand why you'd go for the Ezreal mid in this scenario. And I wouldn't even mind if it was like, we will pick Ezreal first and we will flex it. Then I can understand. But they had Varus.
Yep.
So you're kind of like, okay, well, if I want to go for poke, why not just take a Jace?
Yeah.
And that's where I'm just like, I don't really understand the game plan here.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they're just like, Jace with some of the new items isn't as strong, but I still think he's got merit to a mid lane.
Yeah.
And it definitely will provide more than Ezreal with what you're looking for from Ezreal in this style of composition.
I mean, I think for Team Heretics as well, just talking about the status of the team is like, yeah, we didn't like the Ezreal mid. I agree as well. I'm definitely on the hated train, especially when like the damage output is just so damn low in comparison to what it is bot lane. I wish we have stats to provide that backup. This team, like during the regular season, we got really hyped because they were consistent. They became consistent, I should say, in games, right? Where, okay, they can play slow. They can really just punish mistakes, and they could play some clean League of Legends when they're up. But the problem is that we didn't always get that Team Heretics. And so, like, this is another team, kind of like Vitality, in a different way that I'm at a loss, because I'm like, what Team Heretics are we going to get versus SK? Because I don't know how to properly diagnose this team. Like, Perkz is obviously not having a good split.
Yeah.
And that's completely fair. Like, this guy's a legend, but this split ain't it. And like, you know, like some of Flackett's games have been question marks. I don't know where else you want to go with this.
I think it's kind of heartbreaking for me at this stage, because obviously EU fan for years, and then seeing kind of Perkz not being able to perform.
Whole team. This is such a cool team to look at.
Yeah.
Like,
and I think this team for me was set up to see Perkz succeed. I don't think as Flackett as like the hyper carry, right? In Europe,
of course not.
Like he will bring out things like the Seraphine. He wants to try and play more of like, I will do my job, but I'm not going to be the one that you like Supa. You're not going to be the one that you put all those resources in and then he's going to hard carry the game. That's not what I look at Flackett for. So it felt like to me this team was set up to have Kaiser roam mid, work to play around Perkz and get Perkz ahead, and he wins the game.
Yep.
And this just hasn't been what this team is for me. And it's sad. Like I think he has had opportunities where you can try and set up, but I've seen too many times where Perkz takes a step too far forward, doesn't respect the enemy team, and just dies isolated. You know, not isolated, but like is the first person to die in a fight when he shouldn't be.
I'm not smiling because you're sad. Like, I don't want people to think I'm sadistic. I just thought of something, you know, that Beatles quote that was like, you know, is Ringo the best drummer in the world? And I think it's John Lennon saying, like, Ringo's not even the best drummer in the band.
Yeah, he's not even the best AD carry. Yeah.
No. No.
But I mean, there is like, I know some people have like said like maybe Perkz should. I'd like, this is maybe a bit BM, but like stayed in the AD carry position because he was an incredibly strong AD carry.
He was.
But yeah, at this stage, it's just kind of like well, what's the game plan for this team? Because even when they complain, I do enjoy, because, well, like I'm an analyst, watching that like slow out League of Legends where it's like we will outplay with smarter position on the map and set things up. And that kind of worked for like, maybe it was like week 1, day 2 and 3. But as we started to go on in the split, it just got worse and worse. Whereas like, you're not setting up the map correctly. You're not getting waves in places. You're not getting your vision down in the right spots. And you're over-aggressing into a point where you're not fighting in the positions that you should be with the composition you have. Whether it's like hold a choke point from entering from jungle to river so that then we can have people that are going to get hit and we can provide a strong front line, or whether it's let them come into river so that then we can find multiple flank angles and that kind of stuff. It feels like there's no real thought process on how and when they're fighting, but also how they are setting up for objectives. And I think this is where, for me, Heretics are just going to fall flat. Where even when they get these leads, which is very funny, is because of like the caliber of players that are on this team and what the G2 from like 2019 was known for, was like, hey, we're going to play super smart on the map.
Yep.
That's not what I feel like I can get from these guys. I feel like they're going to completely toss it at some stage whenever they get those.
And it's a shame. Again, like, I know it's only winter. Like, he's hoping that this roster, continues to stay together, doesn't make any rash changes over winter, The shout out, that was a bit of BM, but I had to do it. But this is again a team with a lot of experience, and he's hoping. On the other side, you kind of sound confident in SK, and I know we're running through time. We're like, we've got to be lightning. Right. What do you mean? There's no what? I got told we usually run about 70 minutes.
Yeah, we're at 72.
Yeah, we're over. Okay, never mind. We can go for 2 hours at this point. Do you want to give me some context onto SK? Because are they still the best mid-jungle team or one of the best mid-jungle teams? Do we lose that confidence because they lost versus Vitality? Like, I think they were kind of shocked like we all were, but also that doesn't give, an excuse to a team that I think now we've developed high expectations of. And when, like Niski was one of the better mid laners in the league and still I think is such an aggressive jungler. We're kind of lacking with that in their game. The only person who stepped up, I feel like that consistent was Irrelevant for me.
Yeah, and I think Irrelevant has been the most consistent part of this team for a long time. And we got to see coming in through the end of the split into playoffs that a lot of the times it was like, hey, if you can focus Irrelevant out, that kind of linchpin that held a lot of their game plan together can be disrupted. I think this is where we get to see the metal that is SK. Like,
true.
They've been punched around. They're not in the best of spots. I think they were riding high off of coming in off on the early split and going like, everyone's celebrating us. We're picking up the wins. We look absolutely fantastic. But it's like, can you, after being slapped down, get back up? And now this is the big question.
Yeah.
I think this is still a team that has a lot to show. I still think this is a team that probably has some nice little sneaky picks that Niski maybe we get to see bring out this weekend.
True.
But I think it's like what are you going to do when it comes to controlling the early stages of the game? What are you going to do when it comes to like trying to push your leads? Because it just feels like the aggressive style that we saw from Isma in the early stages, whereas like Niski and Isma working together hasn't provided that same like strength in the early game that we traditionally see from them. And then when it came to the team fights against Vitality kind of just smacked them.
Yeah.
Like they just didn't feel like they were ready to like set up around objectives correctly. They weren't ready to go up against the a stronger bot lane with like the Kalista Leona coming out. It felt like the whole kind of game plan fell apart. So I don't know is the honest answer. I think
on paper, I'm looking at this and I'm like, well, actually, no, paper's rubbish because then you'd be like, oh, Team Heretics, naturally. I think based on winter performance, I have more faith in SK.
Yeah, I agree.
But also, like, are they going to get, is Team Heretics top side going to get the G2 buff? Are they going to just be unstoppable in playoffs? So far, the answer is obviously no because we've already seen them. But I don't know. It's a weird, doubtful matchup that I think could be an absolute banger, or it could just be a one-way slugfest.
I do give the edge to SK, and I'm curious if this kind of gives the confidence boost that SK need back to continue forward. Also, like Niski and the podcast in like our third episode was like, "There's no way I lose to Perkz. He's washed." So this is your chance to prove it, mate. You know, knock him out. But
next episode, you just get Perkz. You get Perkz on after they've won if they win.
But yeah, I think definitely I give the edge to SK, but it feels like a very deflated SK from what we've seen, and I want this team to bounce back because, like, I think a lot of people when they listen to the podcast and think, "Oh yeah, like." We're shitting on these teams, like we want them to fail. It's like, no, we actually like, I don't think any of us want any of the teams to fail. Like we only want to see good League of Legends, and SK were providing us with very fun, very clean League of Legends, and it's sad to see them step away from that. And the same with Heretics, where it's like, this is a team that myself included, people had a lot of faith on and thought they'd be able to bring it back. And it's sad to see that we don't get that. So honestly, I'm just hoping that we get to see some magic from either squad.
Yeah.
But I think, as you say, with the results that we've seen from Winter and what SK were able to produce, I give the edge to them if they're able to get to those high highs, because Heretics just haven't been able to consistently produce that.
And again, I'll say it a third time, it is sad. Like, and it's sad that we lose one of these teams, because I think this is the matchup where like one of these teams could actually make, you know, like top 3, top 4 on a very good day. And then regardless, they have to go up against Fnatic, which is going to be a BO3. I wish that was a BO5 of the winner of this series. But yeah, like that'll be really cool. And especially, by the way, if it's a Wonder, you know, Wonder versus Oscarinin for a playoff BO5 would be my little slice of narrative to add in. But yeah, to finish up on this, I will say that the matchup that I would like to look forward to, or like really see pop off, is like a good day Perkz versus Niski. Yeah. Perkz hasn't been that great this split. Like if we see a really good Perkz versus Niski, that would be fire. And then what do you reckon, Dagda? Top could also be fun, but it'd just be Wonder, just be playing, doing Wonder things, and then Irrelevant just try to win the whole game himself.
Yeah, I think it's going to be, we will see a Jax ban, and then we'll see where the rest of the story takes us.
Top again.
I think we'll be more of like, hey, we'll get Wonder going back towards his like Casantes, his Gragas, trying to just provide that like weak side top laner. And then, Irrelevant, in theory, should have a reasonable time in that top side matchup. But I think it'll just be like a, maybe Irrelevant gets a good champion, he can go like slightly ahead. But it's not one that I think is going to like blow open. I think Wonder has shown he's consistently too good to just let a top laner blow open the game against him.
So that ain't it.
I think a huge amount of this is going to be like mid-jungle.
Yep.
I think it's going to be Jankos Perkz versus Isma Niski, and seeing what they can do, and then lending that pressure into bottom
side. True. I mean, that's how SK won games. Isma Niski is an insane duo. All right, there's a final matchup, Dagda, Heretics SK.
Yeah,
mid-jungle performs SK, right? Right.
Yeah, I think it's SK. I think it's
easy to say.
Yeah. I mean, it's heartbreaking to see Heretics like that top side and go to waste, but
dude, we got 3 splits. It's okay. We got 3 splits.
We'll see how it goes. But I give the edge to SK in this one.
Yeah, okay. All right. Now, community questions is how we wrap it up, round it out.
Yeah.
Send it down, line it up, press the button, elevate it. Level 3, please.
Yeah, so don't forget, you can always send us your questions on Twitter. There will be a post on @LEC where you can try and follow up on this kind of stuff and get your questions put through as well. But we picked out 2 questions from the Twitter post. So do you want to far ahead and read them on out?
I would like to scroll down and have a look at that. Yes, I would indeed. So the first one that Dagda has found from Mr. German Piano, props, I also play the piano. Pros always say that the gap between East and West comes mostly down to macro plus team fights. Why do our teams have such a hard time improving on that aspect? If you want to open that up, Dagda.
Yeah, I think a large portion of this comes down to how we, understand the game. Like, you'll see an awful lot of the times it's like when you look at a team like JDG last year, right? They have an incredibly strong understanding of what to do at every point in time across a team fight.
True.
And the communication's on point. They have a much better understanding of like how they want to try and set up objectives, how to try and play side lanes correctly and that kind of stuff. But it's like very, very minute details that make that difference. And anyone that's played any kind of sport or anything at a very high level, it's like trying to improve from like a 98.5% to a 99% is way more difficult than trying to improve from like 50 to 55%.
True, very true.
And it's like down to tiny things where I know we looked at this a lot for like, obviously coming from the LPL for Xiaohu. it would be like he would half health a minion on top lane because it would barely give his wave a push, which then would stack, and he would understand the timing on, oh, okay, well, in 3 waves time, that massive 3 waves that we've just built it will then crash onto the tier 2. And it's these like tiny little minute details that were making these big, big differences.
Yeah.
And to try and get that understanding and trying to be able to spot all the different pieces that are in play at any point in time is incredibly difficult. While, so I think it's very, very difficult to do. And I think it takes like rare cases for that to come together. And I think when you look at just, well, realistically the player bases that we've seen a lot of LCK and over in LPL as well, they just have more talent to pull from. And it's like, I think you get these guys that just understand at an incredibly high level what they can do and how that's all going to fit together. So I think that helps in a certain respect as well. But it's definitely a case of, it's the tiny details that I think are also the most difficult to spot and pick up, which makes it very, like, it's not like it's going to be just easy to go, hey, I am a mid laner, I will watch Faker and Knight, and I will be like, cool, I understand what they're doing perfectly. Because it's not, it's like tiny, tiny things that you are trying to infer from their gameplay that you may not even cop that is the reason why they're doing whatever the thing might be. It's just like, oh, okay, well, he's decided that he needs to roam bot side at this point. But it was like, actually what you didn't cop was he killed 2 minions before he roamed on bot side play, because that would then set up for a bounce back, which means that then he gets the advantage of the next one. And it's those tiny, tiny minute details that are really difficult to try and spot if you're just like watching games without actually talking to people from the region, which is why I think it's cool for like Carmine Corp to bring over people like Stake who have like worked within these systems and like can try and impart that knowledge. Now, obviously takes time for that knowledge to be imparted. It hasn't worked out, but I definitely think like having that conversation and breaking down some of those barriers to have that communication between the East and the West is going to make things easier.
And see, for me on top of that, like I can add in that I think it's also time management, or rather like the commitment to things. Like for example, work ethic. East versus West, like there's always a strain of mental health doing things like playing esports professionally, right? Like there's always going to be. I think the way the East kind of saw like regime and like, regiment, like you wake up, you do this, you do this, you do this, and this is what you do, was a little bit more strict than the West. I mean, it always has been culturally, right? And I'm trying to explain this in a very simple way where I think for the West, maybe there's more leniency with how the players spend their time or what they do, or this is, free time, whatever, because there's obviously more care and mental health in the West. I think that's just a fact. Yeah. Like at least there was in the past. And feel free to correct me, anyone at home. But in the East, like I've seen LPL regiments for a day. Like there's a lot going on, like, and they have the time to focus on small things. They have the specifics, or more specifics than the West do, because they're able to break down and with more time with players who are spending like more of their life on things like that. Like I guarantee you there's probably less of a social life. There's more of a work life for these people in the East rather than the West, if that makes sense. And
as an aside to that, like it's not only that I think they do have a bit more time put into it. It's also, I think the time is better spent. And that's not a knock at Western teams. It's the literal monetary investment into these teams has way more. Like you have massive organizations with massive backing staff where you can employ one guy to look into a minute detail to see if it gives you an edge. So like we've seen teams like Giant X Split starting to use their algorithm to see, like they picked up Jackies, right? They're starting to moneyball the system and that kind of stuff. But we've actually had this in, like, I know was it LGD? There was like a documentary that was done on LGD, and they had like a training system for 13 and 12-year-old kids where they bring them in and they do reflex tests, they do aptitude tests, they do like a whole bunch of different tests to see like, hey, is this someone that clearly you're playing at a high level, but is it someone who could like go the distance and make something more of it? So I think it's not only a case of like they have maybe put more time into, there's less separation between like social life and work life. It's just more of a, we will grind, but also I think the surrounding staff around them makes it easier for them to then focus on more intricate points, which makes them then better across the board.
It also helps with places like China that have an insane population, right? Like there's more people to pull from naturally as well. Places like Korea that have the PC bang culture where, that's inbuilt into the culture as well, where people are gaming, from a young age, and there's a lot more of them than the West too. It's, the culture of gaming and the culture of esports is a lot more approachable in the East, I think, because everything in the environment set up around it. And when you start getting into the system as well, there is more to pull from, as you said, and there's more resources in. I think that's an easy way to kind of dictate why there's always been a gap between the East and the West. Some people are saying it's getting bigger. I don't know if that's correct, but I still know that I expect the East to win Worlds or MSI this year. That's
I think it's as you say, it's like the people are more willing to get involved in the world of esports in the East, because it's like when you look at like Uzi being voted the number one person in China for 2021, I think it was, like popularity contest.
Person, not esports, by the way.
Yeah.
It was person.
Yeah, it's against all musicians, artists, celebrities in general.
That's like
Uzi
Caps getting voted like person of the year, versus like Ryan Reynolds.
Yeah, exactly.
Like Arnold Schwarzenegger. Yeah. Like, no, Caps, you're number one. Like that, it's crazy.
Yeah, it's absurd. Like imagine Caps beating Taylor Swift.
Yeah,
that's basically what happened.
It's like, wow, well done.
And I think that's where it's like it opens up more angles to get involved, and people are, as a result, you just have a wider pool to pull from, as you say.
And just to round this up before we get to the last question, I will say as well, with stricter expectations coming from family and parents in the East, like I'm not sure if this is a stereotype or not, then a lot of the time that I feel like, an escape is gaming, right? Like I remember gaming for me being an escape, right? For part of my life. With that happening maybe more consistently, maybe as a theory, then maybe that's why gaming is a bit more ingrained as well from a younger age, because it is used as an escape tool. So yeah, there's a lot of theories on this one. I hope that answers it, Mr. German Piano. Good luck with your studies, and hopefully you can play us a tune next time. Okay, last question that Dagda also found. This comes from Mixu at Mixu Kame. I hope I pronounced that correctly. Any picks currently that you think are being overlooked by pros, or any picks being overvalued? Go.
So for me, it is I think it's Xayah. I think we've seen her picked up a lot over in LPL. We're seeing a little bit in LCK as well, which is, I think Xayah Rakan is just an incredibly strong bot lane. Like a huge amount of what we want in bot lane at the moment is pushing, because you want to be able to control the wave. So then if you can go for invades off your jungler, you're in a great spot. So I think having that pushing opportunity is really, really strong. But also when you hit 6, it is significantly more difficult to try and gank you on bot side.
True.
A lot of what we're seeing at the moment, a lot of our discussions even today was like, Madline's Koi bot lane getting exposed, well, not exposed, but like being hit hard, in that bot side to make sure that they were going to be shut down.
Yep.
You can't really do that against Xayah because she's got so much safety. And even if you try to dive against a Rakan as well or something, like Rakan just ults, it makes the dive very, very difficult to try and play around. So I do think there is like a window where we could see significantly more Xayah up in the future. I'm just surprised we haven't honestly seen an LEC so far.
Agreed.
Yeah.
I will say the other thing that I want to see more, we saw it from Yike. Lilia is strong. Lilia, one of the strongest junglers, I think, at the moment as well. Remember that on AoE, it's 100% Omnivamp coming through from things like Riftmaker. So, yeah, really strong champion at the moment. Love to see more Lilia. The other one as well, I'm kind of blanking on, but
I think you were talking about
Trundle. I was talking about Trundle, which quality life change in 14-2, everyone. He gets 25 extra range on Chomp, and he's already a great split pusher. And it's like with grubbies in the meta as well. Like, you put 2 and 2 together. I think Trundle could be a really abrasive top laner that people kind of have to deal with. So, yeah.
Yeah, and then I think we're seeing a little bit more Ornn as well, which I think is a good call, because we've seen so much K'Sante. Yes, K'Sante wins the matchup, but it's like when you've got, I want to engage onto long range Varus, just send the ram.
Send the ram.
Send them in. Go for it.
Agreed.
Like you got nothing to do.
Need to see more Ornn. I hope that answers your question to Mixu. But Dagda, I'm told, I'm already so far over. Like we've ended this hours ago. No, about half an hour ago. But, I'm sure Dragos will forgive me. I'm sure Phil will forgive me as well. I'm sure you'll forgive me.
Always.
Forever
and always.
Good. For anyone wondering what's happening this weekend, I can tell you right now, G2 BDS are coming up this Sunday. That's the first BO5, by the way. That's when we do get into BO5 territory. Quick note before that, on the Saturday, we have those elimination matches. And then afterwards, Vitality Fnatic waiting for those who win those said elimination matchups. But again, G2 BDS is going to be a barn burner. Like, this could very well be, a rematch of the finals.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be absolutely sick.
Pre-match.
And I think it's just to ingrain it into you, Saturday is going to be a best of 3 between Heretics SK, Giant X, Mad Lions Koi. Two of those teams, will be eliminated. The winners will then face on Monday against Vitality and Fnatic. But our first best of 5 will be on the Sunday, which will be between G2 and BDS.
Again, BO5 territory is good. Yeah, 5 p.m. Berlin time, okay? Not Australian time. I'm not there. I'm over here. Dagda, it was a pleasure being with you.
Yeah.
And a pleasure
Thank you for filling in. Appreciate it.
I'm sorry to drag us. I hope he feels better soon. Big kiss to him. And for the rest of you, Euphoria, we'll be back next week with the real man right here.